Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. Always appreciate all the support. Chiefs Eagles on Sunday in the big one. It is the week leading up to the game where you have, I don't know what they call it, Radio Row, Media Row. I don't know if they call it Radio Row anymore. But yeah, you have players from all these teams. You have radio outlets, media outlets, appearing in New Orleans, and Josh Jacobs, one of those players for the Green Bay Packers, who appeared on multiple outlets on Wednesday, including the Up and Adams show with Kay Adams, talking with Chris Sims of NBC Sports, appearing on 97.3 The Game. I believe that's out of Milwaukee, a local radio station in Wisconsin. And Josh Jacobs kind of reiterating points as he was asked questions, and he didn't give you the player speak. He didn't give you the filler lines, the easy things to say. I don't think he said anything too controversial, but it's gaining steam on social media. Thought we would hop on and kind of break down and give our own thoughts as to what Josh Jacobs really didn't hint at, but just directly said on Radio Row Wednesday down in New Orleans. And first off, I don't think it's some big secret that there is a pocket of Packers fans, and I would say more than a pocket. There's a decent contingent of Green Bay fans that would prefer a true wide receiver one be brought in this offseason. I don't think that was some big secret entering this week. I talked about it a couple weeks ago with the name Davante Adams being brought up. So I didn't think that was some great unknown. And you would think with the presence of social media today and pretty much everyone having some form of it, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or a combination of all of them, that players are also aware of what is being said. Like when I saw that the Mavericks traded Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis last weekend, and you're seeing the responses, one of my first reactions was, man, it's got to be tough being Anthony Davis because you're a top 15, 20 player in the NBA, but you just got traded for Luka, and everyone's saying Dallas got fleeced in the trade. And so Anthony Davis has to be in some form or fashion aware of what was being said. And, he was just catching kind of shrapnel for that. It wasn't like, wow, Anthony Davis is horrible. It was, why did Dallas just trade a 25-year-old superstar who just led the franchise to an NBA Finals appearance last year, is in the prime of his career, and is a top 5 player in the NBA when he's on the floor. And so Packers players, whether they'd admit it or not, most of them are aware of some of the stuff that's being said. And so that's why I'm seeing the topic being brought up over and over again, like, what do the Packers need this offseason? Clearly, it appears they need some help at the pass rusher spot. You could use some help at cornerback with the uncertainty surrounding Jair Alexander. And then there have been topics brought up pretty often about, hey, what do they do at wide receiver? And you factor in that Christian Watson's probably going to miss a large chunk of next season. And so the position's probably going to be addressed in some manner. And a lot of people want Green Bay to go out and get a number one wideout. So Josh Jacobs is on Media Row, Radio Row, whatever they call it. And Chris Sims of NBC Sports tweeted out that Jacobs said, and I quote, "We need a wide receiver. I love the guys we have, but we need a proven number one." That is a tweet from Chris Sims of NBC Sports quoting Josh Jacobs. And then, in a direct clip that you see on video, Josh Jacobs, appearing on Kay Adams' Up and Adams show, said that he believes Green Bay definitely has a spot for Davante Adams. Davante Adams appears on that show semi-regularly, or at least has this season, has sort of flirted with the idea of Green Bay. When he was asked about it directly, Josh Jacobs asked about it by Kay Adams on Wednesday and says, yeah, we definitely have room for Davante Adams. And then on 97.3 The Game, Jacobs said again, and I quote, "I think we need a guy that's a proven number one wide receiver already." And there were a couple of responses by Packer players to this, one directly, one semi-related or related, but just not directly going at it. And we'll get to that in a minute. But maybe this caused a stir because it appeared to be like overkill from Josh Jacobs, like just going on all these platforms and repeatedly saying pretty much the same thing. Like, I like the guys we have. I love the guys we have. We need a true number one wide receiver. We need a proven number one wide receiver. I definitely think there's room for a guy like Davante Adams. But in Josh Jacobs' defense, he wasn't going on these platforms like holding up a sign stating this. He was asked the same question, or a similar version of it on all these platforms and just said what he's thinking and what a lot of Green Bay fans are thinking. Yes, I would like a number one wide receiver. I think we need that. Love the guys we have: Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Malik Heath, Jaden Reed. The list goes on and on and on. There is a lot of young talent in that wide receiver room, but Jacobs is saying what a lot of people are thinking. I think we need a number one wide receiver. And I did not think, at its core, I have zero issues with what Josh Jacobs said. Some on Twitter were just a tad triggered that perhaps he was speaking so bluntly. I say, who cares? I don't think we have to coddle these players. I think there's a line in the sand that always has to be drawn, and on Twitter especially, often people go way over the top, and it's always people with fake avies as their picture, and you don't know who's really behind the account. And those are the people that go way over the top, oftentimes on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now. But for this situation, I don't think the wide receivers for Green Bay need to be coddled and it's okay, you don't listen to what Josh Jacobs said. Dude's just speaking what a lot of people are thinking, and it wasn't a direct shot at any name in particular. If your retort to this is that it could cause friction in the locker room, I'd probably tell you I'm good not having players who are overly sensitive to the direct comments that Josh Jacobs made. I probably okay not having those guys in the locker room. So 2 responses came from this that were notable. One from Dontavian Wicks, who tweeted laughing emojis and a thumbs down at Josh Jacobs' comments, and one from Jaden Reed, who tweeted something not specifically at Jacobs or the comments, but related to it and Packers fans talking about it, and then Jaden Reed deleted his tweet. And I'll say this, and maybe I should have prefaced by saying this. I'd have completely different thoughts on all of this if Josh Jacobs came out and on, the Up and Adams show on 97.3 The Game or to Chris Sims, had he come out and said, we clearly need help at wide receiver. Our wide receiver room, they struggled this year. They didn't step up. Jaden Reed had a good first half and then really dwindled down the stretch and did a disappearing act in many games. Dontavian Wicks, young wide receiver, but he had a lot of drops this year. We need an upgrade. We need a number one. We need an alpha wide receiver. Had he said names directly, like Christian Watson, man, hate the injury, but he's had injury problems throughout his career. Maybe not as, significant or related to this knee injury, but he's had hamstring injuries, seemed to put those aside. Now he has this devastating injury in Week 18 against the Bears. He's had trouble staying on the field. Had he said names directly, I would have been like, what are you thinking, Josh Jacobs? But it was more so I love the guys we have. I think we just need a stapled-in number one. And then when he's asked about Davante Adams, that was his former teammate in Las Vegas, and obviously Davante spent the majority of his career in Green Bay before going to the Raiders and then the Jets. I don't think it's crazy in any sense of the word what Josh Jacobs said on Wednesday. Had he said direct names and brought up some of the miscues or misfortunes that those players had this year, then I would have been like, okay, probably not the best idea. So if those were the words and the sentiments, I'd be wondering what the hell Josh Jacobs is thinking, but that's not how he went about it. That's not what he said at all. The guy just, again, he spoke what many people are thinking. And, you can say, are some things better left unsaid? Yes, absolutely. I don't think this is one of those cases. And for what it's worth, and this is the part that Josh Jacobs didn't say that I'll say, and maybe it's piling on a little bit, Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed were both tied for third in the NFL with 9 drops apiece this year. Big number. They both had 9 drops. The real issue, and where it gets alarming or concerning, is you can look at the base number and say Dontavian Wicks had 9 drops, Jaden Reed had 9 drops, tied for the third most in the NFL. Yes, that is concerning. But when you go another level into it and you say, what matters with dropped passes? Certainly, circumstances. Is it happening late in games? Is it happening in crunch time moments, big spots? But if you look at targets, the more times you're throwing the ball, no matter how good you are, it's more opportunity to also have a slip up and have a drop. And so I looked at target totals. That's where it was really concerning to me. Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks tied for the third most drops, 9 apiece this year in the NFL. Here's the big difference. Wicks had 9 drops on 76 targets. Reed had 9 drops on 75 targets. Jerry Jeudy led the league with 13 drops. He had 145 targets. And if you want to look at 2 names who tied with Wicks and Reed, Jamar Chase of Cincinnati, Malik Neighbors, the rookie for the New York Giants, also had 9 drops apiece. The big difference, again, I don't like to suffocate with numbers. These ones matter. I'm going to say it again for emphasis so it gets drilled into your mind. Wicks had 9 drops on 76 targets. Reed had 9 drops, 75 targets. Very similar. Jamar Chase also had 9 drops this year. He did so on 175 targets. Malik Neighbors also had 9 drops this year. Did so on 170 targets. You add the total targets for Wicks and Reed combined, it falls short of what Chase and Neighbors had individually. All 4 had the same amount of drops with 9. That's the concerning part to me. The targets aren't necessarily there because there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Green Bay wide receiver room. The drops are. And for 2 of them, they were near the league top. I'm not giving up on Dontavian Wicks. I'm not giving up on Jaden Reed. I love Jaden Reed. I love Dontavian Wicks. Both have a high floor, in my opinion. Neither has reached their ceiling, or I hope even close to it. We saw a regression with the passing game down the stretch run of the season. It's not strictly on Reed, Wicks, the wide receiver room. I also think some of that blame pie goes to Matt LaFleur and the play calling. Some of it goes to Jordan Love and sort of just the blandness that we saw in the passing game. Whether it was against Minnesota, Chicago, the playoff game certainly against Philadelphia, it was abysmal. I love this wide receiver room, Reed and Wicks included. I'm giddy about how they appear to have plenty of room for improvement, and I think they'll find improvement entering the 2025 season. It does not take away from the fact that Green Bay needs to address the wide receiver spot this offseason, especially with Christian Watson scheduled to miss a lot of next year. I don't think you can go in with Dobbs, Wicks, Reed, and just expect or hope for a lot of growth and for maybe one of them to emerge as a wide receiver 1. Goody and company will have to figure that out, whether it's draft, free agency, whatever. I'm in the Davante Adams camp, but I'm in it under one condition. It has to be free agency. Given his current contract right now, I don't want any part of it. I don't want Green Bay to trade for Davante Adams in that contract and give up draft compensation for him. All indicators are that it's very, 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 very likely the New York Jets will release him. If the Jets release Davante Adams, I can't imagine he'd command or demand the current contract he has. You can get him on a more team-friendly deal for a couple of years. And when I say team-friendly, more than compared to what his deal is right now. And you can bring him in. He can be a mentor of sorts to some of these young guys while also still proving to be, as we saw last year, a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. Does he have 4, 5, 6 more years of that left? No. Does he have 2 or 3? I absolutely think so. That's why I'm so smitten on the Davante Adams name. He's durable. He's as durable as it gets. Guy doesn't miss games. Yes, he's in his 30s now. A lot of teams will shy away once players of any position reach the age of 30. But the numbers speak for themselves. The durability speaks for itself. Davante Adams is still a proven commodity in the National Football League. That's who I want. And there's familiarity, obviously, with the Packers. That's why I want Davante Adams. On top of it, cherry on top, he can mentor some of these young guys. I think he would be receptive to doing so. Not a bad name to learn from. Keep in mind, Davante Adams early in his career, the one thing that consistently plagued him the first couple of seasons, drop passes. He figured it out. Wicks can figure it out. Reed can figure it out. I think they will. But I do think Green Bay needs that alpha in this room. There's a need for it. And I think if you wanted to have the debate like, and it is Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. I think if you wanted to have the debate or the dialogue of, is it a necessity for a team to have a number 1 wide receiver? I think that's a different topic. But if you look around, Green Bay had 6 losses this year. 2 came to Detroit. Amon-Ra St. Brown did his thing. I actually thought Green Bay, didn't let him completely run wild like he did a year ago against the Packers. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, they have so many weapons on that Detroit offense. Gibbs, Montgomery, Laporta, Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown was the first team All-Pro. That's the guy. Goff's in a pinch. He's like, I know I can just go to him. 2 of the losses for Green Bay. 2 Detroit. Another 2 to Minnesota. Justin Jefferson, at worst, he's a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL right now. And this year against Green Bay, he did what he does a lot. And, there's been times where Jair has done a good job of shadowing and containing, limiting Justin Jefferson. Wasn't on the field for that latter matchup against the Vikings this year. And you look at what Justin Jefferson did against the Packers. First matchup, 7 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. The second matchup, 8 catches, 92 yards on 11 targets. That's the guy where, Sam Darnold in a pinch this year trying to revive his career, and he did so for the most part until the stretch run. Those last 2 games were terrible, but Sam Darnold in a pinch, I got Jay Jettis. I can even just lob it up, double coverage. I trust that it's either going to be him or no one. And that's just, it's so helpful to have a guy like that. Now, am I saying the Packers can go out and get a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase? Davante Adams isn't a top 3 wide receiver anymore. I don't think, but he's still top 10, right? He still has plenty of gas left in the tank. He's still a true number 1 option. There's just tiers to being a number 1 option. Green Bay doesn't have anything close to resembling that at the moment. They need that. A.J. Brown, week 1 in Brazil. That's an alpha. That's a number 1 wide receiver. He had 5 catches, 119 yards, and a touchdown against Green Bay. I thought Green Bay's pass defense as a whole did incredible in the playoff game against A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and really the whole passing game for Philadelphia. And I know a lot of people will point at the Kansas City Chiefs, this version of it with Patrick Mahomes, and they'll say, Kansas City doesn't have a number 1. They don't have a true alpha wide receiver. That's an exception to the rule. You know what Kansas City does have instead of having a Jamar Chase, instead of having a Justin Jefferson? They have someone who's already regarded as one of the greatest of all time to do it at the quarterback position in Mahomes. That's the exception to the rule. I wouldn't listen to anyone saying, hey, Green Bay doesn't need a number 1 wide receiver. Look at what Kansas City does. Kansas City has Patrick Mahomes. Kansas City has Travis Kelce, who, he's not in his prime anymore, but when he was, and he was cooking, even before they had Tyreek Hill, but they still had Mahomes and Kelce, Travis Kelce was the guy at tight end of the NFL for years and years and years. That's the exception to the rule. It's not the norm. A lot of these teams you look around, and it helps. Who's ever going to step in for the New York Giants, whether it's a rookie quarterback like Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, whether it's maybe Sam Darnold ends up going back to New York, but instead of the Jets, it's the Giants. They're going to step in and say, I have an alpha at wide receiver, and he's only in his second year in Malik Neighbors. And that'll be a great spot for that quarterback to step into in regards to having a true number 1 wide receiver. Burrow with Chase, J.J. McCarthy. I'm not overly high on J.J. McCarthy. You know what's going to help him a whole hell of a lot? As he steps in and presumably will be the starter for the Vikings next year, having Justin Jefferson. That'll help a whole hell of a lot. And the list goes on and on. There's plenty of number 1 wide receivers. It's just, you kind of have to break it down into tiers. Dak Prescott with CeeDee Lamb in Dallas. CeeDee's absolutely a true number 1 wide receiver. I think Terry McLaurin's a true number 1 wide receiver. He just needed a quarterback. Now he's got that with Jaden Daniels in Washington. I believe Green Bay needs that premium wide receiver. It can cost big money, I get it. I still think for someone who is where Jordan Love is at in his career, I believe it's paramount to bring in or try to exhaust an avenue to bring in a Davante Adams to help with his growth. You know it, you see it every week. There's game after game after game where there's a 3rd and 6 in a big-time moment, and you just know Burrow's going to find Chase. You just know it. And that used to be like Mahomes with Kelce. And you knew the Vikings, whether it was Kirk Cousins this year, Sam Darnold. Yes, they have Addison, Hawkinson, Aaron Jones. But you just knew in a pinch, when push came to shove, it was like everyone knows it. You watch it on TV knows they're going to Jefferson. Or he's the number 1 option on that play. The defense knows it, the offense knows it, the coaching staffs know it, the viewers know it, and they still find a way. That's having that. We saw it for years, Rodgers and the timing with Davante Adams. How many 3rd downs did we see a back shoulder ball where the corner didn't even turn their head around in time, and all of a sudden the ball's just zipped in there? It helped having an all-world quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, but the chemistry and having that number 1 wide receiver with Davante Adams, I mean, it can pay huge, huge dividends if you have that. And with where Jordan Love's at in his career and the regression, again, we saw with the passing game, bringing in, to me, a Davante Adams, or if you want T. Higgins, I think T. Higgins can be a number one wide receiver, can be an alpha. Bringing that in will bring a sense of calm to your quarterback, knowing when I need it in a big spot, I'm not going to necessarily force feed it, but that's my guy. That is my first option. That is my guy. I will say this whole dynamic of Green Bay, in my opinion, now needing a number one wide receiver, I pivoted this season because 2 years ago after that Dallas playoff game, I was like, oh my gosh, Romeo Doubs. Even like at tight end, Luke Musgrave getting involved. But I'm like, Romeo Doubs. Oh, there's Dontavian Wicks on a touchdown. Watson, Reed, all of them involved. All of them big chunk plays. I was 100% fine with the idea of run it back with this core four of Reed, Wicks, Doubs, and Watson for this past season. Again, I'm talking 2 years ago. After what they did in the second half of the season and in that playoff game against Dallas, I was all for, hey, bring it back with these four guys. I don't think we need to do much with the wide receiver room. See if one of them, maybe two of them, emerges into the guy. And it just didn't really happen. At the beginning of the year, I thought it was going to be Jaden Reed. And then as the year progressed, I was like, Christian Watson's route tree is really, really developing rapidly. And he was staying on the field and he was healthy, but then, of course, the knee injury. And so I thought there were times Romeo Doubs seemed to be the safety valve for Jordan Love, but that doesn't necessarily mean a true number one. There were times where Reed looked the part, where Watson looked the part, where Doubs was the guy, right? But they just, none of them took the big step to do it consistently and to really anoint themselves, put the crown on as like, you know what, I think I am the number one guy. And I thought it was fine going into that, or going in with that plan this past year, and I have pivoted. After what I saw this season, now I do think Green Bay, with where Jordan Love's at, with where this wide receiver room's at, they need a number one wide receiver. And so you go back to the comments from Josh Jacobs made on Radio Row on Wednesday. Jacobs played with Davante in Las Vegas. Like, are we shocked he would like to see a reunion? You shouldn't be. In any form or fashion, you should not be. Could he have been maybe not so direct? Sure. I still don't think he was, because he didn't say like names specifically. And I don't think Jacobs was trying to call out his teammates as much as he was trying to advocate or recruit, really specifically, if you watch the segment on the Up and Adams show, just for Davante Adams. It wasn't like Jacobs was like, wow, we need Davante Adams because look at our wide receiver room. It was, man, I think if we get Davante Adams, we're going to be that much better next year, especially with the passing game, especially with the offense. It wasn't a shot at who Green Bay has as much as it was him looking at a former teammate, a guy who spent, again, the majority of his career in Green Bay, and saying, yeah, that'd be awesome. We definitely have room for Davante Adams, I believe was his one quote. There were more quotes and things that Jacobs said that just aren't as grabby to people. Jacobs said directly, Green Bay, he believes, needs three pieces. And if you're doing the math and you know what Green Bay's needs are, right? We all know. It would appear if Josh Jacobs is saying, I think we're three pieces away. Wide receiver would be one, cornerback, again, pending what happens with Jair, and a pass rusher. I didn't see Rashawn Gary or Lucas Van Ness on social media complaining or putting up laughing face emojis with the thumbs down at Josh Jacobs saying, I think we need three pieces. And while not directly saying it, clearly probably hinting at corner, pass rusher, and wide receiver. I didn't see Keyshawn Nixon or Carrington Valentine saying, oh, three pieces, one of them at corner, so we not good enough. Like, I didn't see any of that. We saw a tweet from Dontavian Wicks. We saw one from Jaden Reed, which was later on deleted. I'll say this. Again, love Dontavian Wicks. I love Jaden Reed. There's a simple way for me to summarize my thoughts, and if yours differ, that's completely fine. It's completely fine. I would summarize by saying this very clearly. If Josh Jacobs trying to recruit Davante Adams to Green Bay helps land Davante Adams in Green Bay, and the repercussion from that is Dontavian Wicks has some hurt feelings, I'm perfectly okay with that. Again, if Josh Jacobs recruiting Davante Adams helps nudge that, again, assuming the Jets release him at some point this offseason, and it helps bring Tay, or another number one wide receiver, or an edge rusher, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. He said we need three. I think we need three pieces. If Josh Jacobs trying to openly recruit some of these guys, remember he played with Max Crosby in Las Vegas too. If Jacobs recruiting helps land one of these guys, and the only repercussion or the biggest repercussion is, Dontavian Wicks is kind of upset about that. So be it. Use it as a motivating factor more than anything else. I had no issue with what Josh Jacobs said. Some people do, some don't. He was direct in the sense of wide receiver, wasn't direct in the sense of a name, outside of wanting the name Davante Adams. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please click the subscribe. It takes 1 second. Just click the subscribe. That's not the noise it's going to make. I don't know what noise it makes. I don't think it makes a noise. Just click the subscribe button. Always appreciate all the support. We'll see you next time.